The distress beacon from the Sanctuary fleet died at 14:37 Galactic Standard Time on what would later be marked as the day the galaxy learned its most expensive lesson about humanity. 7 medical transports, 50,000 civilians, 14 minutes of sustained weapons fire. The Kryllian Empire had chosen its target with deliberate precision. Not warships, not military installations, not even armed freighters that might have put up a fight. They had selected the most vulnerable convoy in human-controlled space, a collection of vessels so thoroughly marked with medical insignia that their hulls practically glowed with white and red crosses visible from 3 solar systems away. Commander Velthis of the Kryllian 4th Strike Fleet watched the final transport vessel crack open like an egg, its atmosphere venting in a crystalline plume of frozen oxygen and human bodies. He felt nothing except professional satisfaction. The mission parameters had been clear. Make an example that would shatter human resolve. Show these newcomers that their quaint notions of protected civilian zones and medical neutrality meant nothing to a true warrior species. He composed his after-action report with mechanical efficiency, noting ammunition expenditure, time to target neutralization, and the estimated body count. 50,000 was the intelligence estimate. Perhaps 3,000 had made it to escape pods before the transports disintegrated, acceptable losses for the message being sent. The transmission went out on all frequencies, as ordered. Emperor the Xulor himself had crafted the words, "Let this demonstrate the price of defiance." The disputed terminus systems now belong to the Kryllian Empire. Further resistance will result in similar demonstrations of our resolve. However, we are not without mercy. Surrender these systems within 72 hours and no further civilian targets need be harmed. We await your compliance. Velthis added his own postscript, a tactical assessment for Kryllian High Command. Human military response anticipated within 24 hours. Recommend defensive posture at border systems. Their rage will make them predictable. He was wrong about the timeline. He was catastrophically wrong about the rage. Admiral Elena Kross received the news in her quarters on the ECS Retribution, humanity's flagship and the most advanced warship in the fleet. She was reviewing supply manifests, the mundane administrative work that consumed far too much of a flag officer's time when her aide Lieutenant Prakash entered without knocking. The breach of protocol told her everything before he spoke. "Admiral, there's been an incident, the Sanctuary fleet." She knew the Sanctuary fleet. Every human admiral did. It was the pride of the Colonial Medical Service. 7 ships dedicated to rotating medical staff and colonial families between Earth and the frontier settlements. Her own daughter Maya was scheduled to be on one of those transports, returning from her term at the Arcadia Colony School. The tablet Prakash handed her showed sensor data, communication logs, and the automated distress signals that had broadcast the massacre across a dozen star systems. The Kryllians hadn't even tried to hide it. They wanted everyone to see. Elena Kross read the casualty estimates. She read the survivor count. She opened the passenger manifest for Transport 4, the medical education vessel. Maya Kross, age 16. Status: no life signs detected. Her daughter had wanted to be a xenobiologist. She had spent the last 2 years studying alien ecosystems, learning Kryllian biology among others, fascinated by the diversity of life in the galaxy. She had sent a message just 3 days ago, excited about coming home, talking about the research she wanted to share. Admiral Kross closed the tablet. Her hands did not shake. Her voice did not waver when she spoke. "Lieutenant Prakash, please inform the Joint Chiefs that I am requesting an immediate council, priority Alpha Black." "Yes, Admiral, ma'am, I'm so sorry about Maya. If you need time, I need a war room, Lieutenant. And I need every flag officer in Sol system in that room within 3 hours." Her voice was not cold. Cold implied emotion frozen over. This was something else entirely. This was the voice of a woman who had just watched emotion die and left only purpose in its wake. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session 6 hours after the attack. The council chambers orbited the neutral world of Axios. a space station the size of a small moon where 47 member species gathered to adjudicate disputes, establish trade agreements, and generally maintain the fragile peace that kept civilization from devolving into constant warfare. Councillor Mithras of the Vexian Concordat called the session to order with his usual pompous verbosity, expressing deep concern over the tragic incident, calling for calm, suggesting that perhaps diplomatic channels could resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding. Ambassador David Huang of Earth sat in humanity's seat, his face carved from granite, and said nothing. He simply activated his console and broadcast the distress beacon footage on every screen in the chamber. 14 minutes of sustained weapons fire. Ships marked with medical insignia being systematically destroyed. Escape pods targeted and vaporized. The audio feed catching the screams of children in their final moments before hard vacuums silenced them forever. When the footage ended, Ambassador Huang spoke his first words of the session. The Kryllian Empire has murdered 47,000 human civilians, including 8,000 children. We demand immediate sanctions, military intervention, and the arrest of all Kryllian officers involved for trial at this council for war crimes. Emperor Vixular himself had deigned to attend this session. The Kryllian ruler was an imposing figure, nearly 3 meters tall, his exoskeleton decorated with the battle honors of a dozen campaigns. He rose from his seat with the confidence of someone who had never lost. The human ambassador overstates the situation. This was a legitimate military action against vessels operating in disputed territory. The Kryllian Empire warned humanity multiple times to vacate the terminus systems. They chose to ignore these warnings. The consequences are unfortunate but necessary. They were medical transports. Huang's voice cracked like a whip across the chamber. They were vessels in Kryllian space. Vixular's mandibles clicked in what his species considered a smile. However, the Kryllian Empire is not without compassion. We offer generous terms. Humanity will cede all claims to the terminus systems. In exchange, we will consider this matter settled and pursue no further military action. You have 72 hours to comply. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species called for sanctions. Others urged caution, noting that the terminus systems had been in dispute for years. A few, those who had their own conflicts with humanity or trade agreements with Krylla, suggested that perhaps humanity should accept the generous offer and avoid further bloodshed. Ambassador Huang listened to it all with the same granite expression. Then he stood, gathered his materials, and walked out of the chamber without another word. The Galactic Council continued debating for another 4 hours. They formed 3 subcommittees. They drafted a strongly worded statement of concern. They accomplished absolutely nothing of substance. They did not notice that humanity had stopped asking for their help. The 72 hours of silence that followed became known in galactic historical texts as the Long Dark, though no historian could adequately explain why humanity's brief period of non-communication felt so profoundly ominous to those who witnessed it. Every human ship went dark. Every human colony ceased external communications. Every human trade vessel returned to Sol system without explanation. The entire species simply withdrew from the galaxy and said nothing. Kryllian intelligence analysts monitored this with growing confidence. They are in shock, read one assessment. A species unaccustomed to real warfare has been paralyzed by their first taste of proper military action. Recommend maintaining pressure. They will capitulate within the deadline. Emperor Vixular increased military patrols in the terminus systems and sent additional threats, each one more magnanimous than the last, each one offering humanity a chance to surrender with dignity. None received a response. On the 68th hour of humanity's silence, the deadline approaching its final hours, Admiral Elena Kross finally sent her reply. It was not addressed to Emperor Vixular. It was broadcast on every frequency, translated into every galactic language, sent to every species that maintained communications infrastructure. The message was 11 words long. Show mercy. That ship sailed with our civilians. Cross out. Military analysts across the galaxy would spend years studying those 11 words, teaching them in war colleges, using them as case studies in psychological warfare. Because in those 11 words, Admiral Kross had communicated something that no species in the modern galactic era had truly understood about humanity. Humans could be reasonable. Humans could be diplomatic. Humans could show compassion and mercy to a degree that other species found bewildering. But humans could also choose not to be any of those things. And once that choice was made, once that switch was flipped, something emerged that the galaxy had not seen in living memory. A species that fought wars not with hot rage but with cold mathematics, that planned vengeance the way other species planned construction projects, that approached the complete destruction of their enemies with the same methodical efficiency they brought to building star stations. The Kryllians were about to receive a comprehensive education in this particular aspect of human nature. The first Kryllian supply convoy disappeared 16 hours after Kross's transmission. One moment, 6 freighters carrying military supplies to the terminus systems were on schedule. The next moment, they simply were not there. No distress signals, no debris, just gone. Kryllian command assumed pirates or navigation errors. They dispatched a second convoy with destroyer escorts. That convoy also disappeared. This time there was debris. The destroyers had been cut in half by weapons fire of such precision that their reactors never even detonated. The freighters were intact but empty, their cargo holds stripped clean. Painted on the hull of each freighter in human script was a simple message: with interest. Over the next week, 23 Kryllian supply convoys vanished. Every major trade route was interdicted. Kryllian merchants began refusing cargo contracts. The economic impact was immediate and brutal. But Admiral Kross was just getting started. Human intelligence had spent the 72 hours of silence doing something no other species had ever attempted. They had mapped every single asset of the Kryllian Empire. Every shipyard, every weapons facility, every command center, every orbital station, every military installation on every world and moon. Decades of spy satellites, infiltrated communications networks, and signals intelligence all compiled into one comprehensive target database. Contingency Omicron, humanity's total war protocol, was built on a simple premise. If humanity ever faced an existential threat or suffered an atrocity so severe that normal rules of warfare no longer applied, then the response would not be proportional. It would be absolute. 47,000 civilians had died. By the calculations of Contingency Omicron, that bought humanity the right to dismantle the Kryllian Empire piece by piece until nothing remained but the memory of what happened when you murdered human children. The strikes began simultaneously across 40 star systems. Human stealth ships, technology that the Kryllians had not even known existed, emerged from the dark spaces between worlds. They did not attack population centers. They did not bomb cities. They attacked the infrastructure that kept the Kryllian war machine functioning. Shipyards erupted in cascading explosions as magnetic accelerators put tungsten penetrators through reactor cores. Command centers went dark as cyber warfare packages shut down everything from communications to environmental systems. Weapons facilities found their ammunition storage compromised by precision munitions that turned entire installations into kilometers-wide craters. And through it all, human operators showed restraint that would have seemed impossible to anyone who did not understand humanity's particular flavor of warfare. Civilian casualties were meticulously avoided. Warning shots gave personnel time to evacuate. The goal was not to kill Kryllians. The goal was to make the Kryllian Empire completely incapable of making war ever again. Emperor the Xulor raged and threatened and demanded his military respond. But his military was discovering a terrifying truth. Humanity had been preparing for this war for years, building weapons and strategies and contingencies for conflicts they hoped would never come. The Kryllians had grown complacent on the back of easy conquests. Now they faced an enemy that had studied them, mapped them, and planned their destruction with the kind of obsessive detail that only a species that valued life could bring to the taking of it. 3 weeks into the campaign, Kryllian economy was in free fall. Without military production, the empire could not maintain its conquests. Without trade routes, colonies began experiencing shortages. Species that had supplied Krylla with everything from raw materials to luxury goods found themselves receiving visits from human diplomatic envoys carrying a simple message: cease all trade with the Kryllian Empire, or your own trade routes might experience similar difficulties. Most species complied immediately. They had seen what happened to the Keldari Consortium, a minor power that had attempted to run the human blockade with weapons shipments for Krylla. Human ships had intercepted the convoy, confiscated the weapons, and then, in a display of theatrical efficiency, had used those same weapons to destroy every Keldari military satellite in orbit around their home world. No casualties. Just a very clear message about the inadvisability of aiding humanity's enemies. The Galactic Council called emergency session after emergency session, demanding humanity cease its aggression, calling for peace talks, suggesting that both sides stand down and let cooler heads prevail. Admiral Kross attended exactly one of these sessions, via holographic transmission from the bridge of the Retribution. She listened to Counselor Mithras lecture her about proportional response and the importance of diplomatic solutions for approximately 90 seconds before interrupting. Counselor, with respect, this council had 72 hours to respond to the massacre of 47,000 human civilians. You formed subcommittees. The Kryllian Empire is learning what happens when bureaucracy substitutes for justice. If the council wishes to be relevant to this situation, I suggest you form a war crimes tribunal and prepare to take custody of Kryllian leadership. Otherwise, stay out of our way. She terminated the connection before Mithras could respond. The council was scandalized. Several species withdrew their ambassadors from Sol's system in protest. Others quietly contacted Earth to express support they would never voice publicly. Ambassador Huang fielded the private communications with the same diplomatic skill that made him humanity's choice for the position. Admiral Kross speaks for Earth's military, he told the Vexian ambassador during one such conversation. And Earth's military speaks for 47,000 dead civilians who will never get to speak for themselves. If you want this to end, pressure the Kryllians to surrender unconditionally. Because humanity is not stopping until the empire that murdered our children no longer exists. 6 weeks into the campaign, Emperor Velthis made his first attempt at peace talks. His transmission was conciliatory, almost pleading. He offered reparations. He offered to surrender the officers directly responsible for the Sanctuary Fleet attack. He even offered to cede not just the terminus systems but 3 additional border regions as a gesture of good faith. Admiral Kross responded within the hour. Her face on the screen was calm, almost serene. Behind her on the bridge of the Retribution, officers worked with quiet efficiency at their stations. Emperor Velthis, your offer is noted and rejected. You do not seem to understand your situation, so let me clarify it for you. 47,000 human civilians are dead because you wanted to send a message about warrior strength. You wanted to demonstrate that mercy was weakness and that might made right. Congratulations. You succeeded in sending that message. Now we are sending ours. She gestured to something off-screen. A tactical display appeared showing Kryllian space in real time. Every red dot represented a disabled installation, a destroyed shipyard, an interdicted trade route. There were thousands of red dots. This is not a negotiation, Emperor. This is not a war. This is an object lesson in why you do not murder our children. Your empire is being systematically dismantled. Your military is being reduced to scrap metal. Your economy is collapsing. And when we are done, when you are kneeling in the ruins of everything you built, then and only then will we discuss terms. And those terms will not be negotiated. They will be dictated. Velthis' mandibles clacked in agitation. You cannot seriously intend to destroy an entire empire over a single military action. The Galactic Council will never allow it. Kross's expression did not change. The Galactic Council had their chance to provide justice. They formed subcommittees instead. As for our intentions, Emperor, I want to be absolutely clear with you. My daughter was on Transport 4. Maya Kross, age 16. She wanted to study xenobiology. She thought the Kryllians were fascinating. She was excited to come home and share her research. For the first time, emotion flickered across Kross's face. Not rage, not grief, something colder and infinitely more dangerous. You killed her. You killed 8,000 children just like her. You did it to send a message. So here is ours. You wanted to know what human mercy looks like when you betray it. Watch what happens to your empire over the next month. Then you will understand what you awakened. Kross out. The Kryllian Empire tried to rally. Emperor the Xulor gave speeches about warrior spirit and refusing to bow to human intimidation. He ordered his remaining fleets to engage human ships wherever they could be found. It was a catastrophic mistake. The Kryllian military had built its reputation on overwhelming force against weaker opponents. Their ships were powerful, their weapons devastating, their tactics centered on shock and awe. Against the peaceful species they had conquered over the centuries, these tactics had worked perfectly. Against humanity, they might as well have been fighting with stone spears. Human doctrine did not prioritize ship-to-ship combat. It prioritized information warfare, electronic countermeasures, and network-centric coordination that turned entire fleets into single organisms. When Kryllian battle groups finally encountered human warships, they discovered that their targeting systems did not work properly, their communications were jammed or subverted, and their tactical networks fed them false information that had them firing on their own ships. The Battle of the Kepler Rift lasted 40 minutes, 60 Kryllian warships against 20 human vessels. The Kryllians lost 58 ships. Humanity lost none. The 2 surviving Kryllian ships limped back to their home system with sensor logs that would be studied in horrified disbelief by Kryllian command. They were not fighting us, read one survivor's report. They were conducting a demonstration. Every shot was perfect. Every maneuver was precise. They destroyed our fleet like a surgeon removing tumors. This is not an enemy we can defeat. This is an enemy we should never have provoked. Emperor the Xulor had the officer who wrote that report executed for defeatism. It did not change the reality of the situation. 10 weeks into the campaign, the Kryllian Empire was effectively finished as a military power. Their shipyards were debris fields. Their weapons facilities were craters. Their trade routes were controlled by human blockades. Their colonies were cut off from support and experiencing severe shortages. The Galactic Council, watching this systematic dismantlement, finally understood what they were witnessing. This was not a war of conquest. This was not about territory or resources. This was a carefully calculated demonstration of what happened when a species crossed certain lines with humanity. Counselor Mithras made a personal appeal to Admiral Kross, asking her to accept the Kryllian surrender offers that were now arriving daily. Admiral, you have made your point. The Kryllian Empire is broken. Further action serves no purpose except vengeance. Kross met with him via holographic link from the Retribution. The ship was currently in orbit around one of the outer Kryllian colony worlds, maintaining the blockade that prevented supply ships from reaching the surface. Counselor, do you know what we found when we liberated the terminus systems? Mass graves. The Kryllians had been systematically executing the local populations, making room for their own colonists. Thousands dead. We found similar evidence on 3 other worlds they had conquered in the last decade. This is not about one attack, Counselor. This is about an empire built on genocide and intimidation finally being held accountable. Mithras was quiet for a long moment. What do you want, Admiral? What will it take for humanity to cease this campaign? Unconditional surrender. War crimes tribunals for every officer involved in both the Sanctuary Fleet attack and the atrocities we have discovered on conquered worlds. Permanent human oversight of any future Kryllian military, with the capacity limited to system defense only. Reparations to be paid to the families of every human killed, as well as to the species they have brutalized. An Emperor the Xulor in chains, standing trial for crimes against sapient life. You are demanding the complete dismantlement of their civilization. No, counselor, we are demanding the dismantlement of their capacity to commit atrocities. The Kryllian people can rebuild. They can create a new society, a better one. But the Kryllian Empire, the institution that taught them that might makes right and weakness deserves death, that empire ends. This is not negotiable. Mithras disconnected without another word. But 3 days later, the Galactic Council formally recognized humanity's right to demand unconditional surrender under the wartime atrocity protocols, a clause that had not been invoked in over 400 years. The message was clear. Even the Council, for all its bureaucracy and diplomatic hedging, recognized that what the Kryllians had done crossed a line that superseded normal political considerations. 12 weeks into the campaign, humanity arrived at Krylla Prime. The Kryllian home world had never been attacked in living memory. It was protected by orbital fortresses, minefields, and the largest concentration of military vessels the Empire could still muster. Emperor Velthis himself coordinated the defense from his palace, still convinced that humanity would not dare assault the heart of the Empire. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 200 warships, including the Retribution at their center, commanded by Admiral Elena Kross. They did not immediately attack. They did not fire a single shot. They simply took up positions around the planet, establishing a blockade that was less a military formation and more a work of orbital mechanics art. Admiral Kross broadcast to the planet on all frequencies. People of Krylla Prime, this is Admiral Elena Kross of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your empire murdered 47,000 human civilians, including 8,000 children. Your emperor chose this war. He chose to target the most vulnerable among us to send a message about strength. Today, we send our reply. On the planet below, Kryllians watched their view screens with growing dread. Some fled to bunkers. Others prepared for orbital bombardment. Parents clutched their offspring, waiting for the moment when human vengeance would rain down from the sky. The moment never came. Instead, Admiral Kross activated a device that humanity had spent 60 years developing, a weapon so comprehensive in its effect that no other species had even conceived of its possibility. It was called the Cascade Pulse, and it did something very simple and completely devastating. It turned off every piece of Kryllian technology on the planet simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulse cascaded through every circuit, every power grid, every computer system. It did not destroy them. It simply disabled them, rendering them inert and non-functional. Within 20 seconds, Krylla Prime went dark. No power, no communications, no transportation, no environmental systems in the sealed habitats, no medical equipment in the hospitals. The planet of 6 billion Kryllians was suddenly living in a pre-industrial nightmare. Admiral Kross let the silence stretch for a full minute before broadcasting again. Your technology will recover. Our experts estimate that within 48 hours, basic systems will begin functioning again. Within a week, power grids will be restored. But understand this, we could have destroyed your cities. We could have killed millions. We chose not to. Not because you deserve mercy, but because that is not who we are. We do not murder civilians to make political points. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of every human who had died on the sanctuary fleet. Your empire ends today. Your emperor will surrender within the hour, or we will disable his palace environmental systems and wait for nature to take its course. Your military is finished. Your capacity to wage war is gone. And every species in this galaxy will remember what happened here. They will remember that humanity gave you every chance to avoid this. They will remember that you chose to murder our children. And they will remember what we did to you in response. The transmission ended. On the planet below, in a palace suddenly rendered powerless and dark, Emperor Velthis sat on his throne and realized that he had destroyed everything his ancestors had built. He had tested humanity's patience, and humanity had responded not with rage but with something far more terrifying: absolute, methodical, unstoppable competence. The surrender came 40 minutes later. The war crimes tribunals lasted 6 months. Emperor Xulor and 400 Kryllian officers stood before a court composed of judges from 20 different species, including humans. The evidence presented was exhaustive: the sanctuary fleet attack, the mass graves on conquered worlds, the systematic brutalization of civilian populations, decades of war crimes that the Kryllian Empire had committed with impunity. Admiral Elena Kross testified for an entire day. She spoke about her daughter. She spoke about the 47,000 humans who had died, and she spoke about the principle that had driven humanity's response: that some actions are so unconscionable that they cannot be met with half measures or diplomatic compromises; that sometimes justice requires not proportional response, but absolute certainty that such atrocities will never happen again. Emperor Xulor was sentenced to life imprisonment on a neutral station, to be guarded by human marines for the remainder of his natural life. The 400 officers received sentences ranging from decades to life, depending on their involvement in various atrocities. The Kryllian Empire was formally dissolved. The species was reorganized into a federation of independent colony worlds, each with limited military capacity, all under observation by a joint human galactic peacekeeping force. Reparations were established that would take 3 generations to pay off. And most importantly, the Kryllian people were given the chance to rebuild their society without the imperial doctrine that had made them the terror of their region of space. 5 years after the Sanctuary Fleet massacre, Admiral Elena Kross stood at the memorial station humanity had built in the exact coordinates where Transport 4 had been destroyed. The station was a work of art, a crystalline structure that caught the light of nearby stars and reflected it in patterns that seemed to dance in the void. Inside, holographic displays showed the faces and names of all 47,000 victims: children and parents, doctors and teachers, engineers and artists. All the people who had been murdered for the crime of existing where the Kryllian Empire wanted to make a political point. Kross stood before her daughter's display for a long time. Maya's hologram showed her smiling, excited, so full of life and curiosity about the universe. "I hope you would have approved," Kross said quietly. "I know you believed in second chances. I know you thought all species could learn to be better. I think you were right. The Kryllians are rebuilding. They are learning. But they needed to learn the hard way, baby. They needed to understand that your life mattered, that all those lives mattered." She placed a physical photograph next to the holographic display, a recent image from Krylla Prime showing Kryllian children playing in a rebuilt park, learning a curriculum that emphasized cooperation instead of conquest, peace instead of military glory. "The galaxy is different now," Kross continued. "No species looks at humanity the same way. Some fear us. Some respect us. All of them understand that we mean what we say. When we promise peace, we deliver peace. When we promise consequences, we deliver those too." She turned to leave, then paused, looking back one more time at her daughter's face. "I kept my promise, Maya. The people who killed you face justice. The empire that created them is gone. And I made absolutely certain that no other species will think that murdering human children is an acceptable political strategy. That is your legacy. You wanted to understand alien life. You helped the galaxy understand us." Admiral Kross left the memorial and returned to the retribution. There was work to do, always work to do, but she carried with her the knowledge that she had done what needed to be done, had delivered justice when the galaxy's institutions had failed, had demonstrated that humanity's capacity for mercy was matched only by their capacity to ensure that mercy was never mistaken for weakness. The Sanctuary Fleet massacre had cost 47,000 lives. The response had cost an empire. And the galaxy had learned a lesson it would not forget for generations. Humanity would always offer peace first, would always extend the hand of friendship, would always try to solve problems through dialogue and cooperation. But if you murdered their children, if you crossed that one unforgivable line, then you would discover that humanity had spent centuries preparing for the war they hoped would never come. And when that war arrived, they would prosecute it with the same meticulous care, the same innovative thinking, and the same absolute commitment to success that they brought to everything they did. They would show no mercy, Because as Admiral Elena Kross had said, that ship had sailed with their civilians, and there was no going back.